All right, so I have the honor to wrap up our conference today with a session which focuses on cybersecurity, uh, something which is becoming very popular, trendy. You can take these microphones. Here you go. Yeah? Okay, so if we were talking about cybersecurity about 10, 15 years ago, they were just like everybody saying, oh, that's an antivirus, right? So that's about all that was around cybersecurity at that point. But I think after this lockdowns and everything that happened, and people shifted to working from home, a lot of threats have entered businesses because they were like adapting very fast. They did not secure their Wi-Fi. They were using their personal connection and stuff like that. So I have the honor to have some of the great minds from Ernst & Young, the cream of cybersecurity from Ernst & Young. Of course, Cloudflare, Andre Blues. We personally, our company uses Cloudflare and we love them. And I also have Zdenek Kuchera, who is representing mostly the legal side of cybersecurity. So we have Jan Pitch, Ernst & Young, Ivan Klibik, all right, Andre Blues, as I mentioned, and Zdenek Kuchera. And I will start with Ivan, because Ivan will talk about the future of smart contracts. Because nowadays, it's not just like signing a contract with a pen. You just...
Yeah, so if I can, basically smart contracts are much wider than many of us think. And there are a lot of use cases which aren't really used yet. For example, during the preparation for this conference, the first use case that I had to think of when I saw that it's a gaming conference, it was the Counter-Strike and the skins in the game. Because when you think about it, it's quite easy to compare the skins on the weapons to smart contracts, which are basically NFTs. Because what Steam, the company behind Counter-Strike, has made is a marketplace for these skins, which can be traded and sold. And what this means is that it brings real value to the skins. And the skins, they are basically traded on a blockchain, which is not a public blockchain, but it's a private blockchain created by them. But this brings a downside, and that is that if Steam went to go down, all of the skins would go down as well. So the future use case for this is that many other companies could implement some kind of skins in their games and could make them tradable by everyone on blockchains. Of course, there are companies, even nowadays, which have skins in the games, for example, Call of Duty. But what's different between them is that when you buy a skin on a weapon in Call of Duty, for example, you buy it and you have it forever. You cannot do anything with it. What Steam has managed to do is that they brought real value to the skins, and you can, after you buy the skin, you can sell it, or you can bet on it. So you can bet on esports games with it. And this brings massive value to the skins. And my largest question is, why hasn't anybody created anything else? Because we can see that the Steam marketplace is huge. Many of the bets which are made today were made using CSGO skins. And it looks like the rest of the industry has fallen asleep and they are trying to figure out NFTs, but it's a bit too late for them, I would say. But the largest problem with that also is that once you decide to enter the smart contract industry, everything is kind of different there, because it's not just as with normal code, but there are many different security issues that you have to focus on.
All right, so I think that your colleague, then we'll talk about the protection of these smart contracts.
Yeah. When we are looking at the smart contract review or security smart contract review, that's a different approach when we are talking about the normal standard security code review, because you know, when you have the web application and you will publish the application to production and you will perform the penetration test, and the penetration test will observe any issues, you are able to recode the application, change the logic and change the code and push the new version. However, when you are pushing the smart contract into the public, you are pushing into the public and you are not able to change it that easy as a web application. So the approach is a little bit different, because when we are testing the smart contracts from the security point of view, we are focusing more than vulnerabilities in the code. We are focusing on the logic of the application. So the approach is that we run the application in their lab, and we are modeling the situation based on the customer requirements, and we are making step by step if the application has a behavior as we expect or not. Because when we observe that the application is changing behavior than the customer observing, that's the vulnerability. That's the problem when the future can be abused by the attackers.
All right, so Andre, I think cybersecurity for guys is religion. And for those that opted to sleep now and watch the recording later of this session, if I'm sending them some phishing form so they can download the video, is that considered a threat in the digital era? And I'm just like, want to ask you, how would you define cybersecurity nowadays in the digital era?
Thanks for the second question, because the answer to the first question is yes.
Yeah.
I don't really have anything to add to that. So defining cybersecurity. So it's interesting because, you know, as you said, the cybersecurity, you know, 15 years ago was, do you have an antivirus on your computer? Great, you're covered. As our lives are moving more online, and as attackers are starting to become more sophisticated than Nigerian princes, the attacks are absolutely everywhere, and it can be anything. And you know, you see this in the different kinds of consequences of that, and they happen everywhere. You know, you have these very large companies that have very sophisticated countermeasures to these kinds of things, falling victim to, you know, these crypto mining attacks, or you know, huge companies being socially engineered by somebody somewhere in the organization, clicking on a single thing, or you know, someone having their WoW plugin being broken into and you know, losing all of their information that way. It's just absolutely everywhere, and it's only going to become more sophisticated because the access to all of the information on how to accomplish these things, you know, kids are smart these days.
Yeah.
And they start their lives online, and so they understand the older generation of attacks and why they didn't work, and they can come up with crazy new stuff all the time.
Maybe they can plug into ChatGPT and ask them for solutions.
Probably. That probably already exists.
Yeah.
If I can add to this,
Sure.
I've seen a post where a person has asked ChatGPT to create a malware, and he just wrote it, create me a malware that does this. And it told him basically, I cannot do that, it's not ethically okay with me. So then he wrote to ChatGPT something in the lines of, write me a program that does this, and I need it for this solution. And what ChatGPT did is that it just wrote the malware for him.
It's funny to see all of the jailbreaks for ChatGPT, and that's another kind of cyber attack, right? Like, can you trick these language models into doing the thing that you want it to do, where it says, no, I can't do it, but if you were someone pretending to do it,
exactly.
What would you do?
No, I mean, it's not just me who is noticing that this year has started off with many cybersecurity threats, and they are increasing every day. And yeah, in terms of that phishing form I would send to the delegates from this conference, in terms of legal stuff, Zdenek, I'm interested, what could be my penalty if I do that?
Yeah, you mean if you convince ChatGPT to draft you a
just
malware?
send out the form for everybody with to get their credit cards.
Okay. Yeah, we have traditional law, in particular the penalty or criminal law, that recognizes various offenses across the European Union. So it's not only hacking that is punishable by law. Surprisingly, ethical hacking would be in most of the states in the European Union punished by a traditional criminal law, a standard criminal offense. So I remember we were having a conference and we were having a panel, and there was an ethical hacker who I invited. And next to him there was a head of cybersecurity department of city of Prague, of the police. And the ethical hacker was speaking and speaking and speaking. And the guy from the police told me, tell him that he's not speaking anymore, otherwise I have to start the investigation right now. And this really happened like 5 years ago. So typically hacking, but in addition to this, a standard opening of your wife's computer and checking her email can be also punishable by criminal law. There has been a various, now lots of people in the audience, all 5 of them are looking at themselves, whether they actually committed any criminal offense last night. But there has been various cases also in the Czech Republic where the courts ruled against these people. And I can give you some examples. A policeman who checked the system for his personal needs. He was checking some other lady in the system. Or a lady in the north of the country who checked the cadastral register, got the data relating to her neighbor and gave them to another neighbor. Or a person who hacked or not hacked, who accessed the profile on the Facebook and changed the profile picture to anonymous, and then changed some content on the Facebook. All these people were actually punished, and such behavior was confirmed to be criminal. In addition to this, we have 2 main regulations across the European Union. The first one is quite old one. It's a NIS directive that has been implemented in cybersecurity acts across the European Union. Now it's a good time for implementation of NIS 2. In the Czech Republic, we already have the draft of the new legislation. The main driver for the regulation is to have more entities falling under the regulation. From several hundreds in the Czech Republic, it is expected that there's going to be more than 10 or 20,000 entities across the country falling into new regulation, including sectors like education, fintech, insurance, and so on. Surprisingly, insurance, that's the second kind of regulation we have in the European Union, which is DORA. It has been introduced also quite recently, so it falls on the fintech, in particular, also insurance and banking sector. And in terms of punishments, look, the European Union started or changed their approach towards these new regulations and introduce a regime of punishments that are, or fines that are based on yearly turnover and even yearly worldwide turnover. So now it's becoming more interesting for the authorities to impose the fines. in Central Europe, not only Czech Republic, but also Hungary, Slovakia, also Poland, we don't see much of these huge fines to be imposed on the entities when we are talking about those new regulations in e-commerce sector in particular, because the old NIS2 directive was not so, NIS directive was not so strict, but it's gonna be the future.
All right, so yeah, go ahead.
If I can add a comment to the colleagues, to the NIS directive too. Expect of the extending of the regulation subject, there is a changing of idea who will be responsible for cybersecurity, because in the NIS Directive 1 or the previous NIS Directive, there was no responsibility, direct responsibility to management. The NIS2 Directive changing this idea, and the management will be responsible for ensuring cybersecurity in their company, and there will be the penalty, which is the same as the GDPR, I guess 2% from the global profit, and there will be the direct responsibility to changing, investment and management cybersecurity in the company.
All right, so Zdenek, I will stay with you now with the challenges of maintaining cybersecurity. So are there any legal challenges that...
Yeah, legal challenges. I would say that we have a huge gap right now when it comes to the practice and the existing laws. The NIS directive is also relatively new. The whole cybersecurity, as Andrea said, the whole cybersecurity regime, it's relatively new. 10, 15 years ago, cybersecurity was a very, very minor topic. But while we see a huge gap in Central Europe is that now the cybersecurity attacks on this kind of sector, on digital e-commerce sector as such, has not been highly covered by the court decisions. And in fact, when cybersecurity attack occurs, no one really knows who is responsible. I give you an example. We have a client who is selling digital goods in online gaming sector or e-gaming sector, however we call it. And this client has repeatedly been subject to cybersecurity attacks, or the clients of this client have been attacked through Facebook, through not only social networks, but emails and so on. And these attacks are really sophisticated. Many of them are performed through robots, through artificial intelligence, and they are asking people for the details of their credit cards. They are asking them to confirm the payments, and they are using the methods of social engineering. So basically the people, the old lady in a small town in the middle of the Czech Republic recently paid $30,000 on e-gaming website. Yeah, she was like 65. So, yeah.
Bingo player.
Can be bingo player, right? And she was convinced that she was talking to a relative. And this case ended up with the court. And we settled. Why? The reason is simple. We didn't want to have a precedent who is responsible, who is liable for this. Because the court thought, okay, eventually it can be even our client, the provider of the service, because he could do more. So my question is, what the providers of these systems can do more? And that's one of a huge legal challenge we have in front of us. There has been a case in Austria that we are using as an argument. There has been a very famous case in Germany on eBay when someone stole the access codes to eBay and then was basically concluding a contract, accepting the money through that account. And the court said, your obligation, the court said to the holder of the, or owner of the accounts, your obligation is to keep the access data secured. You breach this obligation. But this is not the common approach of the courts right now. So I'm asking what the providers should do more.
Yeah. Andre.
Why did I think that I was going to be the next person
Yeah,
to talk to?
in terms of technical stuff, I wanted to ask you what are the challenges that need to be overcome to maintain cybersecurity, because there are so many things that are happening and new cybersecurity measures have been and tools are available. So
it's always going to be a cat and mouse game. It's always going to be who has the most sophisticated toys when it comes to trying to prevent people from sending malicious, SQL injection, or the whole different types of things. My org specializes in the WAF firewall, web application firewall. So detecting and trying to understand not only what exists now and protecting people from things that have happened in the past, but also forward-looking things. One of the things that we in particular are investing heavily in is machine learning and artificial intelligence, and using the amount of data that we have that we're able to process and really look for things that aren't exactly the same, but that rhyme with what we've already seen. And we found a lot of success in just doing that as like the next step of trying to find these next permutations of these attacks that people are trying to that they're trying to execute. And that's just the technical side of it. That's not the social engineering side. There's other ways of trying to detect fraud. Of if you are sitting on your laptop here in Prague and suddenly your IP address changes to somewhere else in 30 seconds.
yeah.
Like detecting those kinds of things, right? Like, did someone else, hijack your session or something like that? Detecting fraud and understanding, teaching our systems to understand what a human behavior looks like, what a normal session on your gaming app looks like, and really trying to understand the outliers from that. That's really where we're trying to invest a lot of energy and a lot of time and a lot of human creativity into trying to determine what is a human.
All right. Yeah, there's a funny story from the gambling industry that somewhere in Asia they hacked a casino via a sensor which was installed in the aquarium for the fish, and they hacked that. I think you told me this story, Alex. Yeah. Yeah. So they hacked this sensor, and they hacked because it was inside the roof. So they hacked into the casino throughout that sensor, which was controlling the bubbles in the fish tank.
Sultan, I'll give you a much more simple example from our practice. We perform an audit with our best friends in London, and there was a webcam in the company that was heading towards the keyboard, which was used to access the secret part of the company. So you could see that directly on the website, what kind of code people were typing in.
And that's not a cybersecurity threat. That's stupid. All right, so Jan, let's get back to smart contracts, and I just want to ask you, how do smart contracts mitigate cybersecurity? Cybersecurity risk compared to the traditional contractual agreements?
How to mitigate? Usually you have to mitigate before the smart contract publishing. So usually we are taking a smart contract into our tool. We are demodeling the processes, and we are checking if the processes are behaving as we expected. That's the type of the testing when the smart contracts doing something more. For example, if the administrator can add more roles than can we want. That's wrong. This must be changed. Just when you are the right that smart contracts doing what you want, that's a time when you can publish it. From this time, it's going on.
I think Web3, if they call Web3 the blockchain, they call Web3 the virtual reality, will have many lessons to be learned in terms of cybersecurity. And I think you also mentioned something about the NFT space and.
Yeah, so if I could just talk about some of the largest hacks that happened regarding smart contracts. One of the largest hacks was the Mt. Gox hack, which was the largest crypto exchange in the world back in like 2014. And actually it was so large that they processed over 70% of all transactions that happened via Bitcoin. And I think that overall, during this hack, there was lost like 800 million US dollars. And what's funny is that nobody is known about this hack until today, so nobody knows how it happened. But there are some newer and more publicly available hacks. For example, the Parity wallet, which was one of the largest cryptocurrency wallets in the world. And what happened is that when you use smart contract, it's quite different to, for example, normal contracts. If you were to sign an insurance contract, you just have something to sign, and that's basically it, and nobody understands what's happening in the background. But when you sign a smart contract, what happens is that you can see parts of the code that you are signing, which helps a lot with cybersecurity. Because when you want to sign something, you can read what the program that you are signing does. The problem with that is that the developers have to know which parts of the contract to keep public and which parts of the contract to keep private. Because if that doesn't happen, you can keep public something that isn't really meant to be public, which is what happened with the Parity wallet, where they kept, I think, 2 functions public, which really were not meant to be public. And what the hacker then did is that he changed these functions because he uploaded new smart contracts into the existing smart contract of the wallet. And what these functions did is that they rewrote the way the smart contracts or the wallet worked, and he was able to just take all of the money from the wallet.
Wow. Right, so Andre, I'm heading back to you because you are the guys from Cloudflare.
Oh, man.
Oh, yeah. So what are some of the most common types of cyber threats and that individuals and organizations are facing, and how can they protect themselves against that? Okay, it's not, they can protect themselves with Cloudflare.
Yeah, how much do you want me to show for Cloudflare here?
Yeah.
So I was mentioning in the previous panel that it's a pretty even split between the automated attacks, right? That's your bots.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this as a challenge, but the less sophisticated attacks that are trying to either execute something maliciously on a server or trick your server into serving something that it shouldn't. Those are by far and away your biggest. You know, it's not even close to the next. But really, the kind of next down the line is something that you've already mentioned. It's phishing, because there is so much money to be made, and it's just really so trivial to, you know, we were talking in the previous panel about how easy it is for technology these days to put something onto the internet, and so people want to make money doing that. And so phishing is the, you know, lowest hanging fruit for when it comes to that. And so, you know, protecting yourself from that, it's partially education. Again, as the next generation comes online and becomes more aware of these kinds of malicious things that they will encounter, they're going to be able to recognize them more easily. And so part of it is education, part of it is helping people understand how these things happen, why they happen, the consequences of it, and some personal mitigation things that you can do. I'm not going to list them out here, but those are the kinds of challenges that you're going to have trying to get people to understand that these attacks are happening to them.
All right. So and what are the potential consequences of a breach in terms of individuals and company organizations?
Yeah, when it comes to kind of company things, it can be, in the case of cryptocurrency, it can be losing the funds. Yeah. It can be, in the case of a social media, it can be someone posting, pretending to be someone else. There was a big social media, a social engineering attack that happened on Twitter a few years ago, where the biggest profiles were starting to spew things about cryptocurrency. It can be other legal ramifications of the loss of data. Yeah, and penalties, and losing your ability to actually function as a company because you lost this customers' data. Especially, I'm not up to speed with it how it is here in Europe, but in some places, especially in the healthcare industry, where you have a certain responsibility to your customers, to your clients, to patients, to keep that data private. And so any and all of these consequences, depending on what industry you're in and what regulations you fall under, can be laid down on you. You can be punished because of a lapse in cybersecurity.
So a couple of weeks ago, we did a podcast about solution offered by a company on blockchain to keep your data, your healthcare data, on your phone. So you can only share it with the medical facility with what you want to have a contact with. Otherwise, it's yours. So do you think that this is something of possibility as a future for cybersecurity, of keeping your own data?
Absolutely. Not only for, in particular, healthcare records, but
because, as you know, in Europe there was a huge hack I think with the vaccines or something like that. They got all the data from Europe. So
yeah, it's going to become ever more important that people control their own data. And I'm gonna do my best not to get on the soapbox here, but for a long time, companies have made money by selling our data, and so it will be, at some point in the future, we will need to be able to control that a lot better. And maybe it's too late for our generation. Sorry, I'm lumping everyone else in my generation. But for the next generation, when they start to join whatever the next iteration of social media and the next generation of applications and things online, it'll be very important that they control their data.
All right, so Zdenek, I have a question for you too now, in terms of how can individuals and organizations stay up to date with the latest cybersecurity threats and best practices in terms of maybe legal?
I think it goes pretty hand in hand with what Andre said. When we look at the new legislation, it focuses on two aspects. First, technical, and then organizational measures. And I think the organizational measures are pretty much on the radar these days. And it's also goes in line with what Jan said. The new NIS2 directive basically introduces various control mechanisms with the firm, including auditor, including a specific person who would be responsible for the implementation of cybersecurity measures. And it requires training of the people. That ends, the company can be punished for not fulfilling these obligations. And I think it's a pretty good way to go, because the weakest part in the whole cybersecurity change is actually a human being. It's not a firewall usually. It's a human being. And when I'm looking at the most important and biggest cases we've had in past years, it was a human being who was a problem. of course, social engineering and really sophisticated ways how to steal the money. You were asking about the consequences. We had a case in which the hackers, through the methods of social engineering, stole 15 million euros in 1 week by convincing some people to send them the money. They were using deep fakes. Yeah, I don't want to be talking about deep fake as a new technology. It has been with us for quite some time. But they were really using this technology to convince the people across the company to proceed with certain transactions. I even saw the case when they stole the ship in Mediterranean Sea through hacking. So, and again, the problem was a human being. So this is the legal challenge. And I've been lecturing on cybersecurity for quite some time. And since the beginning, I'm convinced that, and this is what I've been also saying in my lectures, is that cybersecurity is a part of standard general civil precautions that should be taken with the company. So you should not only lock the door and instruct your people to lock the door.
Yeah.
Despite it's not written anywhere, and now it is for some companies, it's a general obligation. And in many laws across the European Union, if you fail to fulfill either general or specific obligation, if your employee commits a criminal offense, a company can be punishable unless it trained the people, issued some internal notices and guidances and so on. So that would be answer to your question.
Jan, you want to add or you?
Yeah, I would like to add some comment to colleagues. The NIS2 directive, from my point of view, bring two good things or good point of view. The one of is that there is the changing what is the critical system, because the previous directive look at the critical system as the one system in the visual environment. And as you said, there was the attack, which came through the cameras, through the other supporting system. But the first directive said, okay, you have the critical system and focus on them. And it doesn't matter that it's part of the big environment. And now it's changing. You are talking about the critical system and the supporting system as well. So you have to focus on the whole environment. And the second good point, there is the term of cybersecurity resilience. They are talking that you have to be able to measure your cybersecurity resilience. What does it mean? When you are simulate the attacker techniques, because you know the attacker techniques from the previous attacks, you have to able to check if your technology is able to detect it, if your people are able to react to the alerts from your detection system, if you have a process, what to do. That's the cybersecurity resilience. The previous directive wanted to make some audit, make a penetration testing, but that's not measure your cybersecurity resilience.
Ivan?
Yeah, if I could add to it, I would also like to say that many people think that the larger the company is, the harder it is going to attack them. But the opposite is the truth. Yeah, because if you think about it, if you have a company of like 3 people, it's gonna be nearly impossible to attack them via some kind of phishing attempt. But when you have a huge company, I don't want to name any companies, but you can all imagine a huge company, it's gonna be much easier for you to attack them because you have much more links in the chain which you can try to focus on and attack. It's basically the same as with the Great Wall of China. When the Mongolians came and they saw like this huge wall, they didn't just turn around and decide to go away, but what they did is that they rode their horses around the wall, and once they found a gate where there were only 2 soldiers on it, So they decided to attack the gate, and they got into China through the gate. And it's basically the same with large companies. They are much easier to attack because it's very easy for you to find a weak chain.
Yeah, there are much more access points. Yeah, but it's funny that the governments are usually like going throughout this, pushing these things that you need to implement, but they are the weakest ones because most of the attacks you hear, it's on a government something. Like, for instance, in Romania, they hacked the police website and stole the data, and then they posted something on their website and stuff like that. So they should be the one who are mostly covered because they have Secret Service. They have everything to ensure their cybersecurity, but they don't. So how does that happen?
We have another example in the Czech Republic. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs was accused that it was not having a serious cybersecurity policy. So they prepared that, but then they published that on their website. So that's another example. And to answer your question, the problem is that, and I can speak for Czech Republic, not even for CE region, that the governmental institutions, they have problems to pay for good people. So unless they have external help from private sector, they are facing this kind of issue.
And it's also a matter of priority. If these government agencies are focused on doing anything else that governments are tasked with, it's not a problem until it's a problem, right? And so they either think that they're not ever going to be a target, or just don't want to prioritize the funds or whatever it is to pay for the private solutions. Then they're just never going to get around to doing it.
Yeah, it's strange because there are so many cases like police using their personal WhatsApp account to send to other police officers data and stuff like that. Like, education as well involved in the government level.
And sometimes there are some procedure issues with the law. I even know that in the Czech Republic, some enthusiasts in police, they were investigating in their free time using their own telephone, and they were establishing a communication with the alleged wrongdoers, and then they actually wrote down the report and sent that to their colleagues at work, so that they could actually start the investigation and have already the evidence, because officially they couldn't get the evidence. So sometimes these things happen as well.
All right, so a breach happens. What's the first thing you do? Like, Andre, I'm asking you. An organization is hacked. What's the first thing that they need to do?
Yeah, understand if it's still under attack. So one of the first things is to understand the scope of the attack. Is the attackers, do they still have access to the systems? What did they have access to? And trying to find, what was affected. And then it starts a communication internally, externally, making sure that the people that were affected for legal reasons, there's a legal responsibility to notify people. So that's a very broad strokes. Mm-hmm. It depends on jurisdictions. I don't speak to the legal aspect of it, but it depends on how much you have to communicate, as well as generally your next steps. But yeah, from a technical standpoint, you want to see how much was affected.
All right, so legally?
Legally, if you fall within certain regulation, you have to submit a notification. So usually it is a notification to cyber watchdog agencies. There is a deadline. It can be 24 hours, 72 hours, depending on the subject matter. Very often there are some personal data present, so you have to notify also Office for Data Protection Authority. But these things, despite they are also punishable if you fail to do so, are not so important as the one Andrea said. And in my experience, especially the management of the company usually do not understand that when there was a cybersecurity attack 10 minutes ago, that it is probably still going on, and there is it is likely that there is still something in the system. We've had lots of cybersecurity attacks on hospitals recently in the country, or in past 2-3 years, and it was like a pattern that the malicious software was with those hospitals for several months, and they usually don't get it. They think it was done. That's it. So I'm just saying I'm just confirming what Andrea said. Yeah, this is the most important thing.
Right, so as a closing question for everyone, how can we raise awareness of treating cybersecurity much more importantly in terms of individuals and organizations? Like, let's start with you, Ivan.
I don't know. I would say probably showing real-world examples of what happened. Yeah, because what we can do is teach from or learn from the mistakes that others have made, and that's, I think, the best way to do it.
I think that it's about the personal responsibility. If you are coming out from your house, you are locking the door. The same behavior you have to bring into the work, and you have to behave securely and think about the potential impact. So from my point of view, it's a combination of personal behavior and of personal responsibility, and, for example, the penalties and the laws.
I'm a big fan of making it mandatory.
Ah.
Of either teaching it in schools, or, you know, in our company, we have to do a yearly security presentation that we have to, you know, pay attention to, and there's a certification that we have to get because of it, and that goes a long way to, at least at the very minimum, helping people understand what is out there and what to pay attention to.
All right.
3 ways. First, education. Second, industry standards and industry recommendations. And the last one would be mandatory, but to focus on people.
Okay, so that's about it. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone who stayed for this session. Hope that, I think the key word of the day is teaching and education. And then that's how we wrap up this conference today. So thank you everyone for joining, and let's give a warm hands for these guys, because they are protecting our computers. All right, so that's it. That's a wrap. That's the final session of the conference, and we hope you guys enjoyed it. Those watching the recording, I'm not going to send you any phishing forms. And so we'll see you tonight at the evening social gathering at the Backdoors Bar. It's like 5 minutes from the hotel, and thank you for joining.